Hey, I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this is the Marketing Gateway. We're out of the office for a couple of weeks, and so we'll close out 2025 with some short episodes about the lessons we've learned from marketing this year and also the things we need to consider about 2026. So, when I was graduating from high school and heading off to college, my grandfather gave me this piece of advice: don't forget who you are. And unfortunately, we've seen some big brands forget this year what their brand is supposed to be about. And they've all paid a pretty big price for it. The three I'm going to mention are Target, Southwest Airlines, and Disney. But you know what? It's a pretty normal occurrence, especially when politics or other controversies get involved. So let's start with Disney, because they seem to have righted their ship somewhat. So earlier this year, Disney, which owns the television network ABC, decided to suspend their late night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel over some content from his monologue regarding the far-right pundit Charlie Kirk, who had been publicly assassinated by a gunman for reasons we still don't really understand. Kimmel's joke was uncontroversial and really not even problematic. He merely suggested that prominent Republicans were trying to distance themselves from the perspective that the shooter was one of their own. And you know, when he said it, there was really no uproar about it. It wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal in Washington, where the Trump administration was not a fan of what he had said, and Disney bowed to political pressure from them and suspended Kimmel's show a few days later. And the world went nuts for a bit over what seemed to many people to be a situation of a major corporation censoring free speech to appease the whims of the United States government. Now, I don't want to get into this whole issue. I'm sure it's pretty obvious. I don't think Jimmy Kimmel did anything wrong. It's his job to make jokes about current events. And this joke wasn't even really offensive or worthy of response, or, well, it wasn't even that funny if we're being honest. But Disney is a major corporation with a lot of irons and a lot of fires. Beyond television and movies, they of course have theme parks, a cruise line, streaming services, licensing and merchandise, and a whole lot of other businesses, all of which operate at such a large scale that even a little bit of controversy can cost Disney big. And it did, especially in their streaming services, Disney Plus and Hulu, because subscribers started canceling both of them in protest. Disney had already reported earlier in the year seeing about 700,000 cancellations due to price hikes. So this was catastrophic, given that they're building their future around a unified Disney Plus streaming service that phases out Hulu in 2026. Social media chatter also suggests Disney saw a lot of cancellations for reservations on its cruise lines and theme parks. Now, whether that's bluster or sincere is actually really hard to know, but it did help to create a PR crisis that resulted in Disney eventually giving Kimmel his show back and, just this month, signing him on for another year. Those actions seem to have righted their ship, given that Disney's Zootopia 2 has already made over $1 billion in movie theaters, and the recently released Avatar: Fire and Ash is also doing well despite middling reviews. Their film and television division doesn't seem to be under boycott nearly as much as it was. So, now let's move on to Southwest Airlines, a brand I already did a video about. You can find a link to it in the show notes, but to review, Southwest Airlines had a really bad time during the holidays a few years ago, and this resulted in their stock price plummeting and activist hedge fund buying up a sizable share of stock and then taking control of their board. And though Southwest has long stood for delivering value to its passengers through transparent pricing and perks like open seating, free checked bags, and other things like that, they're now actively working to function like every other airline and charge for all those services. It's making their customers and their staff absolutely miserable in the process. So, have things gotten better in the months since I recorded my previous video? Not even a little bit. Southwest actually just announced it's going to start charging double for plus-size passengers, which is a big deal, no pun intended, because they were the only airline not doing that, and their new policy is apparently quite aggressive. But undermining all that consumer confidence has made one group of people really happy: the investors who are seeing Southwest stock surge this quarter. And sure, fleecing customers who aren't used to being fleeced is always a great way to generate short-term profits. But it's also a way to undermine consumer preference and brand equity, which is exactly what Southwest has done to itself in 2025. And then there's Target. And I am so sad to see it because I love shopping at Target. But basically, Target has positioned itself for a long time as the slightly left of center alternative to middle America's Walmart, trumpeting its progressive Minnesotan views in how it cares for its employees and the communities it serves. But then, when the Trump administration took over in January of this year, Target decided to eliminate its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, or DEI, and this set off many communities of color, some of whom decided to call for a boycott. Now, usually, consumer boycotts are not effective for mass market brands because they don't really move the needle in terms of spending. But the boycott against Target has actually really damaged the company's reputation. And lowering foot traffic during a time in which Target is also facing declining profits due to tariff costs has been a double whammy for a company that was pledging back in March to boost sales by $15 billion over the next few years. So, what's happened? Well, the people boycotting Target found alternatives and they don't feel a need to come back. Target's reputation has suffered, and third-party monitors such as RepTrack have even found that as Target tries to weather the storm, any short-term gains are going to require sustained focus. It was all a self-inflicted wound caused by trying to curry favor in a new political climate, and if Target does restore its brand, it'll still have an ugly scar to remind it about this year's boycott. So the lesson to learn from this for all three brands is about values, and more specifically, what happens when you decide that short-term success is more important than sticking by the ideals that you claim to stand for. Disney is all about free speech and protecting its talent until suddenly it wasn't. Southwest Airlines was all about protecting its customers from nuisance fees and aggravation until suddenly it wasn't. And Target was all about taking care of its staff until suddenly it wasn't. And none of these brands are going away anytime soon, but their customers might. And there could be a time in the distant future where they wish 2025 was the year where they had stood by their values, but suddenly it wasn't. I'm Sean in St. Louis, and this has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time.